Croaky, mate! Now that I've got your attention, it's going to be looeye versus Steven. I believe American versus Australian. Let's see what happens in this 3-game PvZ set, with looeye being the Zerg. Steven is the green Protoss in the top left of Impulsion, our first map of the day, and looeye is down here in the bottom right. Is he also on the pumpkin train? I don't know what to say about it. I feel so worried about guessing an orange color for Zerg, because every time I think it's electric orange or vivid orange, it's actually pumpkin. But this one does not look like pumpkin, so I will say it is vivid orange. Well, whatever. Fuck it. It wasn't pumpkin. I was right. I guessed correctly. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Cosmonarchy. We've got over 100 player colors. There's about 10 billion orange colors, apparently. And that's just my luck when it comes to guessing Zerg. It will be Hydrith first for looeye. So we have been seeing a bit of a meta shift recently. So for a long time, Zerg was exclusively dropping that pool. And usually it was after a Kagrant so that they could fit in their Larvosk. looeye seems to believe in the Hydrith start with the Kagrant follow-up so that you can slowly build up enough Vespene to turn it into the Larvosk CZ, and that will give you the access to that extra larva. And when you get the larva, it's every 14 seconds. So you can kind of think about this as a faster way to get a second hatch. If you think about it in Starcraft 1 Zerg terms, you go for your macro hatch, and then you try to go for, a fast expansion or something like that. We don't usually see fast expos for Zerg versus Terran, but maybe in this kind of context we could end up seeing it in Zerg versus Protoss, using the Hydralisks earlier on as a nice option to stuff early gateway pressure. It is going to be 2-gate out of Steven. Steven we haven't really seen too much of. He did show up in one of our Team FFA casts back in, I guess it was probably 2 weeks ago now, actually. So it's interesting to see that in action. Always cool, always nice. And yeah, it's been a little bit since we've seen PvZ, so I figured we'd go ahead and show this matchup off. I also get to show off players that either haven't seen too much time in the spotlight, time in the limelight, the way that Steven is, or looeye. I guess it's the same, but he's been around for a little bit longer. It's just I wanted to show his gameplay as well. I do actually have another series of looeye against, I believe it's Smarty Cakes, so that'll be a fun one because it's been a bit since we've checked in with Smarty. looeye going for the fast expansion follow-up here will be pressured by the Dracodon spam out of Steven, although right now he only has the one. That's a neat little option for town center markers. Unfortunately, it is out of sync with the rest of the tiles, so it does look like Bitty tile, but that's all right. That's all right. We all start somewhere. These are notoriously difficult tiles to place without getting seams in them because of the way that the base tile is, if you want to call it that. So it is possible to fix it, but it does take a little bit. It kind of reminds me of, on Near Impact, the asteroid-based map by Jujic. There's a lot of, for lack of a better term, fuckery with regards to the tiling and the cliffs and stuff that have been done there. All right, so we do have 2 Dracodons trying to square up versus the Hydras, but they are going to be hard-pressed to deal with this growing Hydralisk count. That being said, there are 3 of them now. They can still skirmish a little bit. It's not quite like in StarCraft 1, where Hydralisks dealt explosive damage. We actually don't have damage types like that in the game anymore. We are seeing a little bit of split damage here from looeye. He's not really focus firing any one target, but he does end up sort of pushing back the Dracodons. They are continuing to rally across the map. A Nexus on the way here for Steven. looeye does have okay workers for this stage in the game in the matchup, so I'm not really panicking for him just yet, but it does, he might be able to get a pick here. Yeah, there you go. Steven caught a little bit slipping there when it comes to his micro. That affords plus the extra range when you're shooting down the cliff. You get 1 extra weapon range, so that definitely helps out for looeye. Let's see, we got a couple more Hydras coming. A Stargate immediately. Okay, so I think Steven's going to go for Gladius. That does seem like a meta option in this matchup. I love this little arc of Hydras here. It's going to make it a lot harder for Steven to kind of push the extremities because they can all collapse the formation pretty fast and just kind of dive after. We might get to that point where I think looeye has enough Hydras that he can really start to threaten the Drac Ball. But if he does do so without really focusing, now he's spreading out much more, and this is going to be even more of a slam dunk. He's not really going to sustain too much damage whatsoever. The comparison, if you were using Quasilisks for this when you went pool, is so one-sided in favor of the Protoss. So I think that this is going to be slightly unfamiliar territory for Steven. He's now starting to work in the Legionnaires, which are definitely going to be a welcome signing. He's got a couple of them on the front lines already. I think he definitely needs to get those bad boys in action pretty soon. Let's see. He's going to dive forward, and that is going to... Well, they evaporate a little bit too quickly. It feels like he needed to come in with 4, maybe 6 Legionnaires instead of just the 2. He picks off a couple of Hydras. So nominally, he's traded 2 Legionnaires for 2 Hydras. That is a winning trade for the Zerg. Or, sorry, for the Protoss, but the Zerg can obviously remax pretty fast. And, of course, he's also kind of losing a bit of tempo here as this extra base gets established. Now, looeye is still making predominantly military. A couple workers are coming out. He is adding some static defense. He doesn't have any static defense back in the main base. Looks like he's going to set up for another Larvosk in the meanwhile. These depleted minerals over here, I guess, are supposed to be an extra base you can take in the mid-game. That's a kind of a cute strategy. Plus, you got this stuff over here, which is also kind of cute with the aquifers. We'll see if either of those end up getting utilized at any point in this game. I think maybe all of their games were on this map, so we might actually end up seeing this map for a little bit longer. So we're going up to 4 gate, going up to a Grand Library, and it is indeed Gladius is slowly petering out here from that Stargate. I love to see a couple of Izira cores at this point, a little bit of strategic diversity when it comes to the composition for looeye. I think as long as he doesn't get overrun by one big A-move attack, we are going to get it into that dangerous territory where if looeye doesn't kind of bust out of his current position, I do feel like he had the opportunity to just trade down the military and kill all of the Drakidins in favor of, even if he lost a couple of his Hydras or most of his Hydras, that still kind of favors the Zerg there and resets the military count where you can't really start pivoting off of the Drakidins in time. Now we are seeing that very heavy focus into just getting a bunch of Legionnaires out. Now, that being said, there are a bunch of Izira cores as well for looeye, so the plurality of the army is going to be favorable on the ground, and the Gladius count isn't actually too high, so this could be that big swingy fight in favor of the Zerg player. We do have a couple more Legionnaires coming up for Chaff. There is another Gladius that's about halfway complete. Really crucially right now, this is a pre-storm bust. We don't have the Cantavis out yet, and now Gladius is going to fall. Yeah, that's going to really help looeye out here. He still has a bunch of Hydras, and that's the critical thing right now. I don't actually think Steven can repel this without losing so many workers in the process. He's doing well with the micro, now pulling the workers into the fight or trying to get them out of dodge, either or, but really he loses all but 3 workers. That is catastrophic. He will also lose the Nexus. So this is definitely kind of a Zerg oyster, you know what I mean? The world is their oyster kind of vibe. Yeah, that's what we're feeling right now. We got more Izira core slowly streaming on in. We do have a third base being set up in the meanwhile, so definitely a decisive victory in terms of what looeye was able to accomplish. He does also kill one of the Gladiuses. There is, of course, 2 Stargate Gladius coming out now, but that does mean that he's going to necessarily have to sacrifice, especially if he wants to reestablish his Nexus. So he's either going to go all in on the military push for now, or he's going to try to come back into the game with a little bit more of a longer run and maybe try to use those Gladiuses to harass. When you see the Gladius is exactly what we're seeing looeye do here is the right move. You go for that set of Spraiths in the main base, just try to protect all of the spots that you might get harassed. We should definitely see a couple go down here as well in the natural and eventually in the third base. You know, we just need to see a little bit of anti-air here and there. looeye has a good amount of bank right now, so he could try to save up for tier 2 if he so desires. I love filling in some Zealots here as well, just a little bit more beef versus the Hydras. Legionnaires do well if you can actually engage with them, but we did also see there was a little bit of a problem with the Legionnaire count never really being high enough to overwhelmingly engage onto an attack. Now, it does look like Steven has that 6th sense that likely my opponent tried to take a third base behind this, especially since he withdrew. So the Protoss is back out on the map. He doesn't have any presence on the left side of the choke. He is catching looeye as he's mutating some Bactylisks, so that is going to allow the army to be a little bit smaller, a little bit less potent than he would like it to be. Some stacking storms going well there. The Cantavis not really being sniped. That is going to pinch off a bunch of the Izira cores up top with reinforcing Ecclesiasts trying their best to sort of stop the Cantavises from being sniped. All of the front line has gone down. Only 2 Gladiuses left, however. The Ecclesiasts doing their best to hold the line. Not really going to be possible. Looks like that Cantavis is the only survivor of the engagement. We've got Zealots back home. We got 2 Cantavis. We definitely need to see more scribes be made at some point soon for Steven. He wasn't able to shut down the base, and now we're going to see some static defense. So I do think that looeye has successfully done what he needed to do when it comes to this kind of engagement, right? Maybe the Cantavis can kind of sneak in here and storm some workers. Might actually be able to do so. Right now it's just idling at the 3 o'clock position on the minimap. Slowly building up the worker count to something respectable, but he's still down 23 right now. Plenty of static defense coming up at that third base. Adding more and more on the tier 1. Here we go. Big engagement. Not really so big, actually. Pretty small. But the Cantavises weren't by the front, so they didn't end up getting able to cast a good storm. And the stutter back is going to be brutal there from the backs. We are going to see plenty of Psionic Storm there from the Cantavis. It's definitely going to add up. Unfortunately, the Bactylisks are able to snipe it out pretty easily. They just killed that last one with bounce damage alone. Legionnaires work pretty well versus Bactylisks in particular, but at this point, Steven has been at a huge deficit when it comes to that macro, and he's reduced to using workers for the charge and calls the GG exchanged by both players. Good manners all around. And of course, we are going to be going on to a couple of other bases as Steven thinks about... Oh, he's actually typing a question. I was going to say Steven thinks about what he might need to do later. So yeah, Steven's pretty new. He doesn't really know what all the different units are. And so he's definitely in one of those situations where he's like, I wonder, what are we really going to be seeing here? So I'll quickly go ahead and speed through the rest of the replay here. And, well, there was definitely a good amount of... Yeah, there was definitely a good amount of typing there. Okay, let's go into game number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on to game number 2 between looeye and Steven. Looeye is still rocking what I believe to be the electric orange color, with Steven changing up to Maya Blue? Oh, Arrow. Okay, I haven't seen Arrow in a while. All right, well, at least I'm getting one color each time. So as long as I guess both colors correctly next time, I will actually be a winner. Let's go ahead and increment Looeye's score since he did get a nice dubski in the last match. And I think so far... I did confirm, by the way, all of the matches are on Impulsion, so we will be seeing a little bit more out of this map. I don't mind the running the gamut between all the different maps, but sometimes it is nice to see a bunch of games back and forth with the different maps. As a reminder, Impulsion is based on Impetus. It is a map by BDB, Impetus a map by Veek7. Impulsion seems to just mirror it, or kind of flip it, right, across the horizontal axis there, and see what can be done when it comes to the changing up of the tile set, which I don't mind either. I was actually thinking, Hit 'em Up always likes me to port these maps from Starcraft 1, and maybe I should actually try to port them to a different tile set, but I will tell you, and BiddyB can probably vouch for this, it's a lot more effort to port maps to a different tile set than you would initially think. You can't just change the tile set and have all the tiles naturally be mapped to different things. Although, maybe it's not as bad if it's like a Brood War tile set, an expansion tile set that is, compared to a like if you're going from desert to ice, I think that's usually a little bit more elegant. Or maybe even jungle to badlands might be a bit more elegant. Look at this, the big surround, the bronze move. Oh, he doesn't get it though. So close, so close. I don't know why they call that the bronze move. I think in StarCraft 2 it's just really easy to not get bronzed by that. In Cosmonarchy it's probably not that big of a deal if you do that for a little bit, but obviously you want every bit of early game economy to be steady and reproducible so that your build orders go off without a hitch. We are seeing pool, excuse me, into that Larvosk, and it's going to be triple gate. This is going to be a very different look than the last game. It does mean that the Zerg is going to get military units out a little bit faster, but as we get those Legionnaires out, and of course some Quas out as well, they don't actually clear this position, and I love the pylon, just kind of confirming it. This is going to force the Zethicors back, and that's going to really reveal what looeye was planning on doing here. He was going to attack and get his Expo down. I already like this game a lot more for Steven. I mean, for one, he's going 3-gate, which is more aggressive, but I think early gateway definitely can crush the pool armies, especially if there's no Vornath. So we're already seeing those Zethicors be cleaned up. Not really a whole lot that can be done there. They attack very, very fast, but Legionnaires just kind of rinse them. They only take 4 hits to kill the Zeths, and they only take 6 hits to kill the Quas. And so, yeah, you can definitely tell looeye might be in a little bit of trouble. He is making some extra Quasilisks here, so he's not really in danger of losing too much, but I think Steven should be able to get a kill or two out of workers. Yep, there we go. More Legionnaires coming on. Here are the Quasilisks. I do like the burrow from looeye. It makes it a little bit more awkward, but he's lost 3 workers already. Make that 4, and I don't think we're going to see a 5th worker dead, but it's still a lot of dead workers there for looeye. He is definitely down in the dumps, in the doldrums. And yeah, behind that, Steven can absolutely drop a Nexus and start switching into more expensive tech. It looks like he even cut some military units out. He still has his Legionnaires posturing because looeye would recognize here. I think both of these players seem like experienced RTS players outside of Cosmonarchy, right? I think Steven was a GM or Masters player in Starcraft 2, but I think it was pre-Legacy of the Void, if I'm remembering correctly what I read. And I don't remember looeye's experience, but it was something somewhat similar, I think. And I say all of this because they kind of have the theory down, right? Looeye was attempting to move out to see if, okay, if you stopped making military units after all of that successful harassment, then you might have been going for a Nexus, you might be vulnerable to an attack. And then Steven preemptively left his weak force to posture, and looeye was then forced to think, okay, either you're posturing and it's a mind game, or, you know, I don't want to take that risk and have it be that you actually have more military and then you move out and I'm not in a defensive position and I die because my military is halfway across the map, I don't have defender's advantage, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we're seeing actually pretty high level decision making, or, you know, at the very least good level decision making out of these players so far. And I do love that we're already in that territory. And of course, I could be ascribing a little bit more intent where things are circumstantial. Speaking of circumstantial, Steven has slipped his 3 Legionnaires in, and he is going for more economic damage. Looeye only has 9 workers. He was at 8, and now he's back there. He's even lower than there. He's going to be down to 6 workers pretty soon. Oh, God. Well, there you go. Another one hatched, and he's doing a little bit better now. But by golly, that is just... You've been cornered, and your lives were definitely worth it for Steven. He has such a commanding economic advantage. This is probably far worse in favor of Steven than the previous game was in favor of looeye after the Nexus died in this position, right? So our players have swapped positions, and it looks like bottom right stays winning. We got plenty of Drakodins to stuff the pool aggression. They take forever for Quasilisks to kill. If you get some Vorvs out, that's a different story. They can definitely help out. They rend 1 armor, making the Quas deal full damage to them, as Quas have 1 armor pen. And then they also slow the movement speed, stop kiting from being as effective, etc. And we've got Kabbalists coming out from Steven. So he did make a rogue gallery. There's a new feature for the Kabbalist that I'll talk about probably for a little bit here every time we do see a Kabbalist, because I think it's worth underscoring for anybody who hasn't seen it. But it's new in the sense that it was probably introduced maybe a month ago. And it basically means that when the Kabbalist decloaks, it will deal 20 extra damage, which is 50% more damage, right? If you're curious about how the math works out on that. So that means that it will one-shot Droloths. And that definitely is significant, right? But it's only when they initially decloak, because when they decloak, they teleport kind of like Legionnaires teleport as long as they mark their target. So we are getting to that point where, as he's pressuring in, I don't know if looeye noticed that this was happening, but yeah, we are going to see that. And now, of course, since he's not decloaking, he's only going to be killing the workers every 2 hits. This is kind of a massacre here in favor of Steven. He is once again butchering the economy of looeye, who's pinched a few units out, but I don't know if 4 Zets are going to be enough to deal with that Kabbalist. They've kind of stuffed away the Drakodin aggression, but I still don't think it's quite enough. Honestly, the Drakodins could commit to killing this army. Looeye just doesn't have anything going on right now. He has been penalized and brutalized. I wonder how different the game would be if those 3 Legionnaires didn't sneak in as looeye was posturing for a sort of surprise surround if a military force came into the natural and sieged him. You know, that was definitely an unfortunate moment, but now that we get a Grand Library coming in, we got Static Defense coming in, Steven worried about a Zerg flood, and he's just going to go ahead and waypoint some more Kabbalists out. There's a pair of Ovoleths coming, so those Kabbalists are dead to rights. Those Ovoleths do, of course, detect things. Plenty of Static Defense already established. Loads of Drakodins. We got a dozen of them over there. Yeah, I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking to myself, hot damn, we are seeing some serious moves, yeah. All right, well, he's loading up. He made these Ovoleths. He might as well load them up and see what he can do. He's very bizarrely loading them up. I don't know what he's doing exactly. He's wiggling. Oh, he's selecting units across the map and right-clicking, and then they're like, hey, we should magic box because we're across the map. It's the anti-noob feature. If we could fix it, we would, but we don't have the hooks for that just yet. The joys of reverse engineering and all that. So these units are going to get seen pretty quickly, and the Drakodins are already in position to stop this. So really, at this point, I think what we're going to see out of looeye is he's going to scout this, realize just how far behind he is, and hope to get some nice little hits on the workers. But I don't think he killed a single scribe. He could have maybe sniped that Cantavis, but even that was contentious. Wow. All right, well, that was rough. That was not ideal. But behind it, he did make a lot of workers. You know, this is kind of what happens with Zerg. If you can tie your opponent down with a bunch of ridiculous moves like that, ideally you get some good damage out of it, right? Ideally you're able to defeat some of the scribes and all that stuff and clear the way. We got charlatans out there, speaking of. Yeah, I feel like that definitely is something you should think about, but I don't know. The Oveleth's made it out alive at least, so he will be able to detect charlatans, or Kabbalists, rather. However, Kabbalists are not really the main pièce de résistance. I know we see another one in production, but just Drakon and Charlatan alone, this game probably could have been A-moved a bit sooner, actually. Third base now coming on location there. Looeye sees that and wants to maybe go in and pressure it, but he's going to reveal that actually there's a big old force of Protoss army out here. Again, Steven playing very cautiously, doesn't really recognize how powerful his army is relative to the Zerg. Oh no! His Cantavis offered up to the throne of Looeye, saying, hey, maybe you want to win this game? Here you go. Here's another step in that direction. But I still have to underscore, like, Looeye still doesn't have a good army. He still doesn't have one that can actually defeat what the Protoss has. And Steven doesn't know that yet. We know that. Oh, another Cantavis goes down. Or maybe that was the Kabbalist. Definitely need to get better corpse graphics for those soon. He's going to try to cancel the Nexus. Instead, he's going to dive forward and just kind of pick off individual targets. Looeye kind of playing the game the way that Steven was when it comes to posturing as if he's going to be able to do something. But I think Steven's no longer convinced. He's no longer as skittish as he was close to the choke of the Zerg. And to be fair, maybe he's worried about the Zerg reinforcements pouring on down those ramps and coming in for him. But we know that that's not happening. We know that that's not quite how it's been. Drakon narrowly escaping death? Not really. It doesn't move as fast as Hydras do. They're fast boys, fast lads. A lot of Legionnaires, speaking of fast lads. We got some Heralds coming out as well. I like this. I like what we're seeing. I like that. I think, again, Steven could have won the game a lot sooner, but, you know, we're getting a little bit deeper. We're seeing a bit of different military compositions and stuff. And, of course, another Kabbalist here to make things just that much more awkward. Uh-oh. Oh, he tapped the Hydra. There you go. You can two-tap a Hydra if you use the shot that way. Now he's just kind of lurking in the background. This is forcing the largest migration of Zerg this century. No, not quite. We've seen many larger migrations. Shout out to Keen, who one time made a ridiculous move of building over 100 Quasilisks and then kind of just span them around the map on Otherworld way back when. This space is actually accessible at 12 o'clock. Is this charlatan going there? No, he's just kind of there. All right, well, the Kagrants are being established. Looeye is still very much behind in workers. He never resaturated his main base, actually, after that Kabbalist antic. So, yeah, Steven is slowly amassing what he needs. He's got the Heralds out as well, and those are sustained monsters for the Protoss military, as long as they're actually on the front line and activating. Plus, if they die, they ascend the corpses, giving you extra attack speed, so it's just brutal. They're a great tool for mid-engages and such. The Kabbalah strikes again, seeing if he can get out of dodge. And so far, he has successfully done that. Steven's just tooling with him, toying with this Zerg player. And he's got such a big army. Adding a Barghest in there, more gateways warping in. Couple Hierophants being added, a quad of them. Oh, look at this. He might actually discover the 12 o'clock. Yeah, looks like he's considering it. He's like, hey, you're in this game despite me ransacking your mineral line frequently. And there it is. He spotted it. So he's going to go ahead and clean that out with just a small pinch of his army. Most of the Zerg army is patrolling the choke point here as another third base is attempted. But, you know, this Kabbalist is still hanging out here in the main base. Could probably be found with just moving one of the Oveleths there. We do have a set of drops, and my goodness, that's a lot of Protoss static defense warping in. Looks like Steven wants to consolidate his position. The Kabbalist does end up getting bopped. Too big for his britches. Might have been able to come down here and do some things. The drops might have been spotted by this ground army migration, but whether Steven actually knows about it or not is another story. That being said, the static defense galore is definitely going to make it difficult for Looeye to find an angle of attack. We even have some Cantavises lying in wait as the third base, round 2, is going to be engaged upon. A fourth goes down. What the hell? A fourth goes down for Steven. And the drops do end up, doing a little bit of heckling here, but they are not going to be able to do too much as they are pulled into the static defense. And no cancel on that hatch. Not that looeye... I mean, he doesn't have the most of money, but in terms of economy, right? But he does have a decent bank, so I guess it didn't really matter in the end of the day. But, you don't want to lose 300 minerals for free. Here we go. The army engagement we've been waiting for with bated breath all game long. And look at that. Looeye is resoundingly defeated. So Steven, sharking around the extremities, sort of poking around. How can I score my dub? Didn't believe in himself, didn't believe in his units as much, just doesn't have that game knowledge, perhaps. But we are going on to game 3, the final game. And hey, it's a best of 3, and they're 1-1. Who is going to win? Is it going to be Looeye with the experience or Steven with the Protoss OP nerf toss? Let's find out. Well, we could be forgiven for thinking that this is a repeat of game 1, because we still have green Protoss in the top left, and we still have... Oh, shit. Oh, yeah, electric orange. I wasn't sure if it was vivid orange for a second. Right? Yes. Zerg in the bottom right. So, Looeye versus Steven. So far, whoever's in the bottom right slot wins. Will Steven buck that trend, or will Looeye win the day? I don't really get superstitious about your spawn position dictating whether you win or not, but it was funny for the Krankendow versus Cannoli set, the Krankendow versus Shopkeeper Dog set, and now the Steven versus Looeye set, if that ends up being a data point, Clearly map imba. So it's going to be a pool opener for Looeye. Steven just rocking the presumed 2-gate setup once again. I still remember when I saw General Anakin, shout out to a name from the past, he would put his pylon down pretty far from his nexus so that he could fit 4 gates. What a legend, honestly. That's how he beat 3Crow in one of their games, and I believe it was a best of 5, to qualify for Acropolis #1. Basically, April of 2024. Yeah, almost a year ago now. Hope you guys are enjoying Cosmonarchy. It's pretty cool. I highly recommend checking it out. Been working on some faction content. Been working on some content for, well, I guess you could call it game improvements, code improvements for making things work a little bit better when it comes to the iScript stuff that we are necessarily reliant on to add the 4th race, the Ascozi. And I'm also getting a couple of other doohickeys done for a few other small odds and ends for improvements. I mean, you'll note that we actually have the player name listed on structures now where we didn't previously. And this also helps us say, hey, we've got 0 damage taken on these structures. For a while, it would only show damage dealt, which isn't very useful for most structures. So, yeah, pretty much how it is. Steven has been really annoying with his scribe, and it is giving me StarCraft 1 vibes, even though I know he's a StarCraft 2 player, or that's where he cut his teeth with StarCraft stuff in particular. Maybe he also played StarCraft 1 a lot. I actually don't know that about him. Maybe he'll comment on the video to give us some clarity, but I do quite like the worker harassment he's been doing. I think it's pretty neat. So hopefully we can see even more of that in the future. Maybe that can be a mainstay going forward. So Looeye is going for just the bare essentials as far as a defense is concerned, because he's rocking out with 4 pairs of quads that just hatched. He's gotten his expansion down, and he's going straight into a Hydroth Den. Steven gonna handshake him on that and just grab his expansion before any extra military production or tech is acquired, and he will try to muscle through the Quaz bank that has been built up here before the Hydroth pops up. I kind of like this push and pull, if this ends up being one of the commonplace meta options for the various different races. I think that would actually be pretty neat in PvZ if this was a common thing. I'm sure Hit 'em Up and others will find a way to break it, though. That worker gets 1 return in, or maybe not even, before absolutely exploding. And now Looeye is going to have to grab some Hydras to see if he can defend this. Oh, sniping the larva! The unborn have been slain! He's got the Quaz in a defensive formation here. We do have more Drakodons being rallied out over time, but they're not actually coming on down to join with the rest of the crew. Instead, getting ready to start saturating his natural expansion. He's denied it and delayed it. I really like that he's picking the larva. That's such a cool move, because then the hatch is literally not doing anything for you. That's not technically true, because it is absorbing some pressure from the opponent and buying you time to get your more powerful combat units out, but still, it's not even acting as extra production. So really neutralizing any possible usage of it. Very cool stuff. Some other units all the way in the back got burrowed. Don't know how to feel about that. I don't think that was intentional. And yeah, cool stuff. I'm liking what I am seeing. Looks to me like we've got some Legionnaires off to the side so that they might be able to sneak in after the army has already left the station. And it looks like that's exactly what's happening. It's going to be Draken static for defense. Although, it looks to me like these military units are going to arrive a little bit sooner than the static defense has to warp in. That Matrix is the closest one to finishing. Instead, it'll be tearing down the Wardens beforehand, just focusing on them. The Matrix will actually finish. And that does mean that with the general focus fire there, it should allow the Drakedons to hold this at bay. The Legionnaires are trying to get some cooking done back in the natural for looeye, but everybody has abandoned ship as far as building units actually is concerned. A bunch of workers just got ordered up. Only one going down at the natural because they were tasked on the Hatteros. There actually wasn't any active mining during that. So, okay. Steven's been kind of tested here at the defensive choke that he's setting up. He is going to reestablish the static defense in the same exact formation that it was before. And looeye is going to match the worker count of his Protoss opponent and start to establish some static defense of his own. Probably want to see a faster third base from looeye if he can afford it. I think on this map, you probably want to take one that's far away so that you force your opponent to commit army to killing it. Obviously, that means you have to have your own army there, at least a little bit of it. But something like that could be really useful, just so that you keep tabs on your opponent and what they're all doing. Right now, massing up Hydras, a couple of Izira cores, kind of switching off the pool units entirely for the time being, as a second Circuit is in production here. The Drakedons are going to start hammering home. This could be a nice little timing before looeye is able to entrench himself. No losses yet on the Protoss side, though it's worth noting that while their shields recharge, their vitality, their HP does not, so no way for them to replenish that. The Kabbalist duo is out, and, you know, these would have definitely sniped down quite a bit of any defenders there from the Zerg, so maybe you'll have to scratch what I was suggesting earlier. Fast third base from Steven, though, forcing his Zerg opponent to be on the back foot. Now, you can get a little bit more value out of saturating your bases in Cosmonarchy compared to Starcraft 1, so this isn't really the end of the world for the Zerg player. Steven actually hasn't put down his third Nexus yet either, so there's that to consider as well. And some pretty avid chasing from looeye. He's got to make sure that he doesn't abandon ship, because the Kabbalists could definitely ruin him. He has no active detection, and I think his circuits are going to be out of range to help versus those Kabbalists. We do have a couple of Izira cores coming up, but it will be some time before they really get to crack-a-lackin'. And of course, the static defense here, even warping in a third Warden, that should be more than enough to stop this attack from being too successful. And now, yes, the Kabbalists are cracking off shot after shot, sweep after sweep. Looks like only 4 workers will go down before it gets noticed. And there we go. Well, that being said, gets one more. All right. There was one more in the main. I love pinching off multiple. So we're talking about 10 worker kills between the two of them. That is the difference between Steven and looeye right now. Very, very good as far as that is concerned. It doesn't look like looeye is going to allow him to get away with it this time, though. Oh, did he even notice it? He should have. His Obelisk was definitely in vision range there. That's pretty criminal if looeye doesn't end up seeing it or realizing where it is. Pretty much guaranteed to get at least one more worker as a result. So overall, I'll say that Steven has the tempo to take a third base, but right now he's investing in static defense instead. And where... the problem, he's leaving the base. He does not have his Obeleth here, so that Kabbalist can absolutely pop off again later. That is very unfortunate for looeye. It feels like it was right there in front of him, but he somehow didn't catch it. Land effect kind of idling around. Might be there for disruption field first and foremost, although you do have to watch out for the Zerg air switch. Now, this third base is going to get canceled as soon as it gets put down. This is good tempo/reaction from our Zerg player, but now he is going to have to contend with a Kabbalist in his base. He does have some units ready to respond. That being said, the Circuit is going to be contested. Not really a whole lot that his army can do right now. It's halfway across the map. There is a wow, a quad of charlatans, actually. Nice little quartet as the zealots start to descend upon the worker line. And, of course, the circuits are shattered. Now, this is going to set up for potential containment. Steven falling back immediately, trying to make sure that he doesn't lose this army entirely as the Hydras descend upon him. This is still very, very dangerous. He hasn't lost any charlatans yet, but that might change. And, of course, the ground army is going to get cleaned up. Worker count hasn't fallen that poorly for looeye. He's actually about to take a worker advantage once he finishes this up. And it looks like he does claim the life of... I'm not sure if that was a charlatan or a vagrant. Either way, he'll take it. And he's going to go ahead and see about taking a third base as well. All right, so Steven did end up getting stymied in his attempt at expanding. It's a fragile opening here for looeye. I don't know if he wants to try to contest with this army right now, but he has a lot of Hydras. He can brawl. Just doesn't have the economic backing we would like him to have. His subtle... very, very slim worker advantage is dispelled as he builds another Hatterosk. He does need to resaturate his main, especially his main gas. He is not mining gas from the geyser. Those did get picked off by the Kabbalist. Advantages stacking up slowly for our Protoss player. No Crucible yet, but he is adding an Ardent Authority and slowly beefing up security in his main base. A little bit undersaturated in the main mineral line. Only a little bit. Looks like an Izira Core will watch for any expansions in the top right. It looks to me, though, that Steven wants to take a hidden third. No, that's a pylon to block things. Okay, that's cute. Ski backed on the way, so we will see some Bactylisk action later on. At the same time, like ships in the night, the Zerg army is not going to find the Protoss force. Instead, it'll end up rallying back into it. There are some static defense structures here for anti-surface, but... instead, the Protoss army chooses to engage. The Ovaleth goes down. No need for its detection right now anyway, so it simply absorbs the pressure. But this is before the Bactylisks can spawn, and we've got 4 Gladiuses just ripping apart those Hydralisks on the bottom flank. We do have a pretty favorable trade for the Protoss overall. There were some casualties, including some charlatans, but for the most part, the backbone of the army, I think you would say, is still intact. It's kind of part Gladius, part Dracodon right now. Some of the Quasilisks are spotted on their way out. A Hydra will not be long for this world. He is going to go ahead and start working on some of the Bactylisks, and he's filling up an Ovalith for a drop. I wonder... no, okay, that wasn't intentional after all. So the third base will be sniped as Steven tries to take his own. It's a war of who can kill the other's third more times. All right. Well, looeye's sharking for an attack. He's got only 3 Bactylisks in the production tab right now. 5 Izira Cores coming out as well. There's the Barghest for the armor pen. They are not going to be long for this world, but you really got to watch out for the splash from the Charlatans. The Gladiuses getting their bounce attacks. We've got no steady anti-air here. Circuits are his only hope for keeping his opponent at an arm's length. A couple quads in the mineral line. A bunch of quads, actually, in both mineral lines, but I suppose they aren't super useful in the fight, so perhaps it's fine to keep them earmarked for anti-drop defense and the like. Anti-Kabbalist defense. Looeye is not working with complete information, and Steven is a little bit closer to that. He's got that pylon in the bottom left, so he kind of knows, all right, there's no other expansion that's likely to be taken here. Oh, Kabbalist's got sighted. No Ovaleth. Oh, the Ovaleth is down here, actually, so it doesn't look to me... oh, he's going to slip in. He is going to slip in. The Gladius is getting jumped on immediately. One of them does go down. Maybe 2. Hard to say. First Kabbalist, okay, that one does get eliminated. Both of them get eliminated with nothing to show for it. Not even a teleport onto a worker or anything. Reposted, and rebuffed. We were seeing a Cantors be made. They're not with the full army. No, there is one, okay. I was wondering if there were going to be more. Architect's going to be switched into here. Considering what to make out of the Stargate, gas is a little bit low here, but he is going to start to stretch ahead of his opponent. He has more workers, and he's got his third base up and running. So it does feel like looeye needs to descend upon this base and kill it summarily. The problem is that he can't really fight the military force here with the low Bactylis count. He is bouncing a little bit onto the Gladiuses, but it's mostly the ground army that's taking the heat right now. We're down to 6 Gladiuses, but still that's going to be more than enough to push this army back. Izira Core is going to try to absorb some of the pressure, but that is not going to work out too well. And I think Steven has done it. I think he's got more than enough to deal with this. Looeye might have one more attack in him. It would need to go demonstrably in his way. Let's see. Ooh. Couple of Bactylisks getting regressed on the back. We got Charlatans coming in from the north as well. Just adding a little bit more insult to injury, and that will be the wipe in the military. Looeye does have a bunch of Hydras in production. He just started 8, I think 11 or 13 just hatched. He might be able to hold things off, but he's going to have to cancel that third base, and Steven knows that that is likely where his opponent was going. He doesn't see it. He's not going to sweep the Droleth there. And the Gladiuses are going to chance into the main. Only Quas to defend. We are making a bunch of Bactylisks, but the Hydras are going to get pounced on as soon as they spawn, and this is going to weaken them a little bit here. Well, this might be an overcommittal of the Gladiuses. I don't actually know if they can get out of dodge here. Down to 5, down to 4, down to 3. So not too many left over for Steven. He doesn't have too many made. He is making golems. We get to see their new model. Always nice. Check them out. They're big robo-boys. Probably need to be a little bit bulkier, if I'm honest, but that's all right. Oh, and I forgot to add those wireframes from June 3 Hung. I'm such a silly goose. I'll have to do that after this cast. Now, the Bactylisk count is a little bit higher now, is a little bit more promising, but again, you can't really... well, I say that. I was going to say you can't really do too much in this position, but actually, without so many Gladiuses, it's going to be a little bit harder for Steven to finish the job. He does have Architects on the way, and I still haven't seen that Acantor really do too much. Has it done damage? It fired off one plasma shell that connected, I suppose. All right. Exploratory Hydra. Ooh. There you go. It's got a kill. Ooh. Nice shot. Absorbed for now. And that Acantor is probably not long for this world. Can't really fight back from its current position. But the Architects are cracking shot after shot. The Charlatans allowing that Phantom Strike with their debuff onto the Zerg army, and I think this is probably going to be convincing enough to Looeye. He's not able to evacuate. He has been outgunned by Steven. Nice little showing from him in some PvZ. GG's called, and at least the Golem's got a couple of shots in. You know, we got to see him a little bit, that's all. And Looeye will call it out. He is done for now. On to Pablo in there. Smarty Cakes, he was GGing with him. Yeah, Steven posts the dub. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude our cast today. Just going to increment the match ticker there for the score. And I hope you guys like what you're seeing out of PvZ. Steven may end up claiming the most improved or hot new rookie candidate. You know, for a while it was Snow, then Snow wasn't playing. Not the Korean Snow. Maybe he's also Korean, but he was a Terran player more than a Protoss player, so I don't think it was the real Snow. But yeah, now we got Steven in here, and he's seeing what he can do. So yeah, definitely get some more games with this man if he's on. I'll be catching you guys for more Cosmonarchy tomorrow, so stay tuned, and I'll see you then.